Okay, so the last reading that I'll be looking at is this one. It's called Yonika Shonibare by Nancy Haynes and John Picton. So you only had to read page 60 to 65. So the nice thing about this reading is it doesn't actually speak about the specific artwork that we are talking about, which is the Scramble for Africa, but it gives a nice generalization of Shonibare's practice and the themes that he addresses, which will help you in the post-colonial aspect of the question. Okay, so if you go to page 61, which is basically a recap on everything that we've talked about so far. Just here in the second column, African fabric combined with Victorian signifiers, ranging from overstuffed parlor furniture to corseted dresses to a hunting party, has become a signature mark. And with this, he's asking, what is African, what is European? Okay, so we've talked about that before. And again, here in the third column, it talks about his Nigerian heritage and his British education. And also it starts, there's one here, it talks about an example of some work that he did prior, where Shonibare went on to make a series of paintings playing with the notions of identity by placing images of African objects from the British Museum next to those of modern domestic appliances taken from the Eros catalogue. So basically he put an Ife head next to a coffee maker. So that just shows you that this artist is already in that realm of questioning art and craft, where the Ife head is usually in the British Museum under African art section, and it's considered craft. It's anonymously made. It doesn't have a maker, and it's identified as African. It's considered, craft. And then he puts it along this idea of Western technology, coffee machine. So, this is African, this is Western. Technological advancement is Western, primitive sculpture or headdresses are African. So he's already playing with those ideas of what is craft, what is art, what is African, what is European. Okay. So yeah, I think you can just read through this reading. It basically recaps on what he does. It's also just nice for interest's sake. Okay. And it talks about the other artworks and he's made and how he looks at, these Victorian symbols and he dresses them in African cloth. Okay. So the last part of this video is basically I'm going to recap on everything. I'm going to recap on everything. So we're looking at this artwork, Scrabble for Africa. It's got 14 heads, 14 mannequins seated around a table, which has the African map on it. They're dressed in Victorian suits, but with this African fabric. So I want us to look at the high art elements of it. Okay. The first one is, you can argue both ways. The first is the sculptures. You can either consider them mannequins, or you can consider them sculpture. If you consider them mannequins, they become craft because they're made on a large scale, mass-produced. Okay, but if you consider them high art, which they can also be, they're high art because sculpture is associated with the Renaissance, and it was one of the art forms that were reviled or idealized during the Renaissance or during that period. Also, the proportions, we talked a bit earlier from the study guide, the linear perspective and realism and naturalism. The proportions of those sculptures represent how men look like in real life. So it's naturalism, it's realism, which is a symbol of the Renaissance. So because of that, we can situate the work as high art. All right. Okay, his formal education looks at the high art element. He's a formally trained artist. Okay, and another thing of his geographic location, situates him as a high artist. His gender, he's male. Although he's an African male, he's male. So that also helps situate him in the high art realm. All right. Exhibition space that he uses. His artworks are in galleries, museums. Another thing that makes his artwork high art is the concept, which I've talked about quite extensively, the idea of colonialism and post-colonialism, and that interaction between Africa and Europe, and what it meant and the consequences of it now, which are things that he talks about in a lot of his work, not just this one. Okay. Also, the artworks are made out of fiberglass. So this, like the coffee machine and the Ife headdress, fiberglass is associated with Western technology. It's associated with modernism. Okay. Another thing, the dramatic movement that we talked about of the sculptures is associated with the Renaissance, with Romanticism. So it also situates the work in that realm, in high art. Okay. There's one last thing, the clothing, the Victorian clothing, which showed affluence, it showed social class, is also, you can also argue that it's situated, it suggests something that is important, something that is of high status, that can be considered high art. And then the craft elements are the chairs and the tables. Those are craft. They've got a function. They need to be seated on. They act as something to sit on, and it's a table. So that's the craft elements. If you go to section 1 of your study guide, it talks about the art and craft movement and how furniture was integrated with art in order to blur the divide between art and craft. It's interesting if you look at the section on furniture and then you apply it to this work by Shoni Pare. So that's another craft element. The act of sewing, which we talked earlier about, it's associated with femininity. It's considered useless domestic work, but he takes that work, and he's a man, and he does something that's considered feminine, and he takes it and he puts it in a gallery context. So that again challenges the binary between art and craft. The way that the fabric is made, we talked about it earlier, how it's industrially made. It's made on a large scale. That is associated with craft. So all these elements come together, and he basically questions whether there is a need for it. The binary, is it actually fake? Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it appropriate? Okay, so that's pretty much it. If anyone has any more questions, and there's additional readings, I asked you to read the general history of Africa, Africa under colonial domination, 1880 to 1935. You can read this for your own interest or to develop your argument a bit further. But what I've noted here is the things that I'm looking for. I need to understand that you've understood how he blurs that boundary between what is African and Western, what is craft, what is art. All right, so you can email me, you can call me. I should reply as soon as I can. Okay, thank you.